Let's go in there.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, hey, welcome and
Hey,
thank you for joining me today. I appreciate you so much for being here on a Sunday afternoon, giving me
thank you
an
for
hour of your day.
thank you for having me.
For people that don't know you for some awful reason, I know who you are. I've met you a few times. I know you have killed it on the DoD program. Give us a quick introduction. Who are you? How long have you been hacking? And what do you do professionally?
Um, I'm basically a bug bounty researcher. I've been doing bug bounty since I was about 16 or 15 or so. I've basically been hacking since I was in middle school, but done bounties since I was like 15 or 16 or so.
Oh,
And yeah,
how'd you hear about bug bounties?
I think that was through, what was it? When Google was doing their own like very first like bug bounty thing ever.
Yeah.
That was more well known and all that, and that was through Googling stuff and all that. Because the idea seemed very novel, and I think at that point I also found HackerOne when it was like in its early days when there was barely any programs on there.
When it was the internet bug bounty program, you mean?
Yeah, when things were like at the very, very early, those early heydays when things were just kind of new and out there, and things were so uncertain for everybody.
Yeah, it was weird. It was bug bounties were really weird in like the 2014s and 15s when there was like only three, four companies doing it.
Oh yeah, and like the rules, the types of vulnerabilities allowed, even like the bounty amounts were also kind of weird and kind of
Hmm.
arbitrary in some regards.
Yeah, I mean, Yahoo was paying 3,000 a SQL injection when I was hacking on them. Now they pay 10,000 for a SQL injection.
Yeah, like I guess or the value of things have changed drastically after realizing the impact and seeing how a lot of things could impact the company severely through your PR damage or the amount of data that could lead to, lawsuits or whatever that could happen as a result of all that data breaches.
Yeah, I think those data breaches also kind of help the industry because you're directly working with hackers now that do this kind of stuff. Probably they know how to do this kind of stuff that you probably would never hear about.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's also kind of like in a certain regards also in a quote unquote way of taking all the hackers who are on the morally gray scale and moving them all over to the white side, so to speak, on the
Yeah.
white hat side.
So tell me, how did you get into hacking? You told me about bug bounties. You heard about it from Google. You know, you Googled stuff and you heard about HackerOne and you got involved. But when did you get into hacking itself? Like, what got you into hacking?
Oh gods. Um so hacking itself was something that I kind of I guess heard about or read about because around middle school they gave us these like Mac laptops or whatever they were called,
Mm-hmm.
and they were practically locked down like all school computers should be as they were like issued and we could take them home and all that. But well, who doesn't want to play games on their computers either during school or during like when they're at home or whatever when that's sort of the only computer you've ever actually had that was something that you could play with. And I wanted to like circumvent all these little I guess like locks they had in place to prevent you from playing games or doing certain things because they basically just like locked down account that didn't have administrative privileges and all these things. And that kind of just led to like Googling various things like how to get the admin account for a Mac laptop or how to all these like different queries to try to figure out what I could do to bypass and all that.
Yeah.
And I guess that sort of led down to this path of wanting to learn how to do this stuff because it was actually very interesting how it all worked out in the end. And this sort of led to also like doing other things with hacking during middle school, like figuring out how to bypass the school web filter that prevents you from viewing like websites that like YouTube and things like that. And like the
Flash
solution for that
games.
was simply like HTTPS because they were man in the middle everything, so you could just HTTPS and it would never touch it, and you could just visit all these websites for fun.
Yeah, my favorite was hitting the website with the IP address directly.
Oh God, yeah, that too.
Yeah, ours was mostly wanting to play Flash games during our computer classes.
Oh yeah, that too. It was really fun. Like and then like word got around the school how to bypass it, and like everybody's installing these plugins that like force HTTPS or whatever.
Yeah. So how did
Uh,
you get into web hacking from that? Did you just discover about, was it just purely through bug bounties or did you just get curious about hacking websites and wanted to learn?
yeah, I think um with web applications specifically, it kind of like led to learning like googling hacking, how to hack, all that sort of stuff, and then landing on I think what was this? I think the website was called Hack This Site or whatever.
Oh
It was
yeah,
like this
yeah.
very Yeah, that very early days, like web app hacking
The
website and all
missions,
that.
the missions that
Yeah,
they would give you.
yeah,
Yeah.
they were very interesting, weird, and cool at the same time. Like wanting to see how to do that sort of stuff because it was like, the flashy type hacking they talk about in, the movies and TV shows or whatever. Like, oh, they're, breaking into whatever. And that's just sort of, I guess, like set the I guess seed for how it kind of began for me because that's how it kind of came about.
I definitely, now that you mentioned, hack the site was a huge part of it. I did a lot of those missions, the web missions.
Yeah, they were fun,
And
like
then the
very interesting.
forums, like you have to go and look into the forums to see how to, like, people would put spoilers and hints and stuff like that. I think they're still kind of relevant, to be honest.
Yeah,
You can
like
still
they're
pick up some stuff from it.
oh yeah, definitely. Like you can learn a lot from almost any CTF site or those little training websites and all that because you might pick up something new or a little trick or something that they show that you might have not seen before, things like that, or how you go about or apply a thought process.
Well, tell me how you got, so like doing hack the box and stuff like that definitely helps to learn, right? But how did you had this breakthrough at some point. You went from learning to actually owning stuff. Was it just personally getting involved and getting hands on, like saying, I'm going to go hack the DoD and learn more? Or was it through a job? Was it through a training? Was it just pure curiosity and reading everything you found? How did it work?
So I guess like the quote unquote big breakthrough, at least for me, happened with I think the around with DoD when the hack the Pentagon and all that came about because the concept of being able to hack the U.S. military and being
Mm-hmm.
able to be paid for it and all that was very novel.
Yeah.
When I first did the very first hack the Pentagon, I only found like an XSS or something like that, but it was very interesting because I got the you get this little challenge coin, and it was like I kind of want more of these, so I kind of want to like learn how to hack the Department of Defense, and the Department of Defense's vulnerability closure program back then and now is still very very permissive in what you can touch, what you can play with, and all that, and I use that more as a training ground in a certain regards to try to poke at everything, learn how different systems work, how different programming languages and all that interact and all that, from PHP to Cold Fusion to ASP to all these sort of different servers and stuff that you would never really get experience with if you were focusing on certain programs because lots of websites are usually purely coded in one or another language usually.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it on the head with the whole like hacking the U.S. government. Like, who doesn't want to say they've hacked the U.S. government, right? Or the DoD itself. Who doesn't want to say that? I'm curious. Do you have a computer degree? Did you go to school?
Oh no, I never went to college. I
Oh,
also
okay.
dropped out of high school.
Wow. Okay.
So
Tell me more. What prompted you to drop out?
So high school was just something I didn't really take interest in and didn't really see the point in. So I dropped out and then did the GED because family wouldn't stop bothering me until I get that. So I did. Didn't go to college because I there wasn't really anything in terms of computers or anything like that that was interesting to me because I wanted to learn more of web security and things like that. And well,
Mm-hmm.
no one was really offering that sort of stuff, at least with the colleges around me at the time.
Yeah. So you've done your GED through high school, but nothing after.
No, nope.
Do you have any certificates? Do you have OSCP or
Oh no.
CEH? No. Sorry,
Nope.
I like asking the CEH question jokingly. Why? Why not? Do you not believe in him, or do you think it's a waste of time, or is it just never thought about it? Not for you.
At least for me, I just never saw the point in them, and they never seemed to have a value or seem relevant or rather interesting for me. And
Yeah.
I learned more through just self-teaching and kind of just breaking things around as often as I can and reading various articles put out by different researchers and things like that, and seeing all these sort of cool hacks people have done have motivated me more to learn new things that I've never touched before, more so than wanting to go through these, I guess, courses like those OSCP and all that.
Do you think getting OSCP would help any of the new hackers in any way, especially with bug bounties?
I think it could honestly, because it does kind of give you some like I guess introduction to various things, how to use different tools, how to do reconnaissance, and those very basic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But with more, I guess, specific web application stuff, I don't believe it could help that much. It's just, you know,
Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, I think it gives you the offensive mentality, but maybe not so much with web. I think there are
yeah.
far better resources that are free or cheaper than the OSCP.
Yeah, like you will like with Hack 101, that sort of those training videos help out a lot.
Mm.
Portswigger's own articles that discuss different vulnerabilities also have a lot to provide for people who are learning stuff as well. And there's a lot of CTFs that also kind of guide you along that web application security path as well if you want to specifically focus on application security. Like RootMe also has a nice like plethora of web application specific vulnerability challenges they have as well.
Was that
Like
Root
from
Me?
rootme.org,
Okay.
which was like this French CTF type website.
Okay.
They had stuff from Spring Boot to SSRF to SQL injection
Wow.
and various types of SQL injections and like that.
I did not know that. I've heard about him. I've just never gone and looked into it. That's really cool. I'm going to have to look into it. I'm trying to find material that I could go through for the streams that could teach that kind of stuff. That's really cool. So now that you know all this stuff, how do you learn new topics? How do you learn the new research that gets put out there? And how do you keep up with the trends nowadays?
I guess like as far as keeping up with trends and all that is mostly monitoring like Twitter mainly because there's always new articles being either posted or people discussing little tidbit information or things they've noticed while learning and all that. And that's just sort of how I mainly keep up is through Twitter usually because that just seems to be like an endless source of information typically.
Oh, okay. Tell me more. Like when you hear about, let's say, I don't know if you did anything with albino access research, for example, or any SSRF stuff. When you hear about this new technique, what do you do to learn it? Like I want to understand your learning process. Is it that you try and go exploit things in the wild and look for them? Do you go and look for CTFs? Do you go and build your own environment?
So I guess a very easy like example for that would be with the what was it, the GRSSRF
Yeah.
that I saw on Twitter, and that's and reading about and noticing that people, malicious hackers were exploiting that in the wild, and seeing how that exploit works, wanted me to go look through various bug bounty programs to see if they have it and test it out and see how, like how it works out and what are the nuances to it and what sort of information you can gather from it, and that sort of research kind of leads me to understanding how it works, what you could do with it reasonably, what information you can gather from it, and what are other weird oddities that could occur when exploiting the vulnerability. The I guess process for me is mainly just testing it live rather than creating a closed box environment to work on it. Mainly because I'm lazy.
Yeah. I mean, I think aren't we all?
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, yeah, I think it's with bug bounties being a thing now. It's a lot easier to be able to go and learn these bug types on an actual target if you put in the time than have to come up with your environment. That's what makes bug bounties so good, right? Like there's companies that IBM, GM, and Department of Defense are prime for any vuln types you want to learn.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's like if you want to learn, if you want to learn how to do a skill injection, I'm sure you can find a website a vulnerable website that's on a bug bounty program to do that for you. Like a lot of the vulnerability classes I've started learning about and knowing how to do more of was because of all these bug bounty programs, from remote command executions to blind SRF to all these like all these different types of exploits I've never really played with before. I've had the opportunity to find and actually work on because I was able to discover them these very bug bounty programs and being able to exploit them.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to take notes and ask you questions. Let's talk about recon because we kind of covered the whole how did you get started, how did you learn, and all that stuff. But I want to hear about recon. What does recon mean to you?
Recon for me basically means gathering as much data as I can on a target that isn't, too much information.
Okay.
And then having information that is actionable in a way that you're able to use it and able to either leverage it to find more vulnerabilities or able to understand this target more in depth. So if so subdomains, understanding what sort of architecture tools they're using. If they have a Jenkins subdomain, they're using that. So they might be able. So you might be able to find an unsecured instance of that might have been spun up on some other subdomain, for example. Uh, the process of understanding how they are operating and what sort of like what sort of things they're running on, for example. Um, and recon can range from just finding subdomains specifically to, just Google dorking their website a million times to see
Right.
what sort of things you can dig up on them, or if you can find, internal documents or stuff that outlines their APIs and things like that. And recon, you can even just boil down to reading their how-to manuals on how to use your website, for example, for basic users. Finding how to use your API, what sort of interesting API calls they have or you can use, for example, that are available to normal users and that you
Right.
could possibly exploit. And that's something that a lot of people pass up on, I think, because all like if you walk through a website as a normal user and you read the documents that are provided for users of their website, you might find a lot more vulnerabilities than you will realize because a lot of people will pass that up.
Do you what use? Sorry, what tools do you use? Skipped a word there. What tools do you use?
uh, like as far as like tools, I don't use much really. I use
Yeah.
like Aquatone really for like the subdomain stuff, and that's more or less it. And then, that's just mainly what I do. I use like Burp Suite as well for, brute forcing directory subdomains or FF as well.
Okay.
That's more or less it. I don't use many tools. A lot of it's a lot of manual stuff.
Walk me through a little bit of at a high level. What is the manual process like? Is it that you look for subdomains? So that here, let's put this way. You run Aquatone. You get a list of subdomains. So let's say it's for army.mail. You get a list of subdomains. What's next?
So after running through, basically getting a list of subdomains, we'll run that through, um, so you either run that through the port scanner or whatever to see which subdomains are alive or not, and then sort them out alphabetically, and then look for, I guess, interesting subdomain names for example. So if you
Okay.
see something that's like dev or console or things that are kind of odd with how they're named, like you see some like weird coding of how they put like names and all that. So
Mm-hmm.
things like test console or test F5 or things like that. Those weird little names that you might see pop up here and there. Those weird subdomains or tend to be stuff that I want to look at because they're usually have something on them. If they're just a string of characters or numbers or things like that, for example. There's also the more common stuff like specific name for VPNs or Jenkins, Grafana, and those types of things that are specifically named.
Okay.
And then things that are like beta, test, staging, dev, etc., etc. Those types of things as well. And I tend to focus on stuff that is more likely to be vulnerable. So subdomains that I've you know might have not noticed before, like subdomains that are ones that you might have not noticed in other subdomain lists that you might have aggregated, for example. So if I have, if I have a list of subdomains from another tool, for example, I'll try to see if that one might have stuff on it, or if, the subdomains within subdomains, like, you have Jenkins console, but you have a test.jenkins.console or whatever, that sort of stuff.
So, just to wrap it up, it's mostly previous experience, things that you have seen in the past in other programs have been interesting to you. And then you
Yeah.
look for permutations of like test, dev, QA, UAT, whatever that permutation could be, that environment could be. And then you look for internal tools like Jenkins, Grafana, and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, any sort of internal testing tools, internal consoles instances, and things like that, as well as like their own homebrew like internal testing tools as well. Because
Okay.
that's something else you might find as well. There's their own tools that they might use, or they might have thrown up on there and give it a weird name.
Do you do any screenshotting at all?
No, not really, actually.
What about Nmap or masking?
I do Nmap sometimes, but not
Okay.
often.
Okay. What about um, so what's next? You find a domain that says API app/dev.site.com. What's next? You go to it, it's a 404 page.
So you know, once we have a domain and we have one that we want to look at, my first instinct is usually throw that into a Google Doc basically. Just do cite that subdomain and then see if anything pops up.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes things will pop up that you might not notice on a brute forcing. So you might be already cached by Google, for example, or Yandex or whatever search engine you might use. Um, because I've noticed that sometimes with subdomains have 404 or have nothing on them in theory tend to have stuff on them that might have been cached at one point by the search engine. Um, Another thing would be to just brute force the directories with various file names and all that from a list, for
Yeah.
example, to see if anything pops up. And then possibly see if we can do any errors or see how that subdomain works for L. For example, is there a proxy going through that website specifically? Can you mesh with said proxy? Is there some weird behavior you can do by changing the host header to a local host, for example? Are there APIs or are there any sort of like the very common, like the very given one is like if it's like an API that's subdomain, then you want to check if it has an API on it. So API or V1, V2, that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah. Um, what are you about historical data? Do you look for any like Wayback URL, Wayback Machine data at all?
Oh, definitely. With Wayback, it's something you do want to check because a lot of times you'll find data that's, at one point that might have been there. So, like, for example, if you do a Wayback on a subdomain and on the way back, you'll notice that there's a little admin header at the bottom, and you click it, and well, you have the admin URL now, and so you can go check the actual website that's still alive to see if the admin link still works, for example. And sometimes that actually ends up working out because that just tends to how it be. There's been times with like Department of Defense websites where I did a way back and although on the live one the admin URL was gone, but on the 2 or 3 years ago there was an admin link on it, and you copy the admin link and you throw that into the live one, and well you have an admin panel for whatever military website that is, and then you can start poking at it like that.
Do you automate any of this?
No.
No. What about notes?
Hello?
Do you take notes?
Notes sometimes. I take notes of like any sort of interesting things I've noticed or behavior or stuff or things that kind of are weird in how it handles stuff specifically to see if I find another endpoint that might either handle that data weirdly as well or might do something uncommon or an error or something like that before.
Okay. Um, speaking of automation, do you have a big background in coding and developing stuff?
I don't have any actual experience with programming or coding at all, actually.
Tell me more. What languages do you know, if any?
I don't know any language really. Like I can kind of understand a bit of PHP, but that's at basic, and
Okay.
that's mostly understanding PHP from a point of perspective of recognizing common vulnerabilities that can manifest through it. Understanding what sort of functions are dangerous to use and how you could exploit that, for example. Um, like most of the PHP knowledge I know is mostly from googling various functions or things in source codes I found and seeing if they have any vulnerability or if there could be exploit for vulnerabilities, for example.
Yeah.
Like like very common, like one that I found was like I managed to get the source code for an endpoint and the file had shell execute and I found that you could just RC that easily.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think. I mean, do you think it's a requirement for hackers to know how to code for bug bounties at least?
Honestly, you don't really need it as far as I can tell. You can there's hackers that can do that without coding. There's hackers that can. It's kind of I guess up to what works for you, I suppose.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. I didn't have a huge background in hacking. I'm very open about it. I mean, not hacking, programming. I know Bash and I know some little tiny bit of Ruby. I mean, maybe 10% of what most people know. But I do have an experience with web development. Like I understand what goes in the process of developing a website and the mistakes they could make because I've made those fucking mistakes. But yeah, it's very very true. You don't need to be a you know full stack developer to be successful in bug bounties. It
Oh yeah,
helps a lot.
it helps you understand it from the perspective of building and all that.
Did you have any mentors or anybody that like helped you in bug bounties to get better, or did you just self learn?
For most of the, I guess, first half, quote unquote, first half of like my bug around experience in years, were mostly self-taught, and then after that, I just kind of was, learn stuff from other hackers like CDL and other hackers I've interacted with at the HackerOne events or you know online, the Slack channels and all that as well.
Okay. Um, what about so one of the viewers actually is asking that what do you think is a good balance between learning and doing research and actually hacking? How do you balance that?
So I guess for learning and researching and all that kind of ties all together for me because as I'm researching something, I'm also hacking something at the same time. If
Okay.
I'm wanting to understand behavior of a specific type of SRF, for example, if I want to know how a how using Gopher protocol to send emails or whatever on a for an XSRF, for example, I'd be doing that either on a CTF or an actual website I have on SRF on, and wanting to see how that works and understanding the different behaviors. There's been times I've taken a lot more time than I should have with reporting vulnerabilities because I was wanting to understand the nuances of how this exploit worked and what I could do specifically with it that could raise the severity or impact of it. So I guess part of what I do is learn, like hack as I learn and learn as I hack, because it's a bit of doing a bit applying what I learn and
Right.
researching what I learn as well, and seeing how far I could take what I've learned initially and applying that in a way that could be pushed further than a way I already understand through finding articles that discuss these types of stress or seeing how more in depth you could go with certain types of attacks, for example.
How do you pick your targets? How do you pick what to hack on?
Really, mostly on like how interesting target is for me in terms of like what's at stake, I guess you could say. So military websites, for example, are very interesting for me because it's always a lot more is at stake in terms of your national security or privacy data or more political data that could pose a risk if it got out, or medical targets, for example, and all that. So I guess picking targets really depends on I guess legal policies, so say if they have safe harbor and all that, along with how well they're connected with the community, how well they interact with the community, because programs that tend to interact with, the community and hackers through, reports and all that are something that I tend to want to hack on more because I'm able to interact and able to ask questions about what sort of thing I should be looking for, if this like weird bug that I found is intended behavior or not, or if there is something more to it. Um, along, but the bounty table and all that isn't really super important for me, as long as the safe harbor policy and if the target in of itself is very interesting to me, as well as how well they are connected with the community as a whole.
Okay. When do you know when to stop on a target or a particular subdomain? Like, you've been going at the subdomain of this target, not finding anything. When do you stop? When do you draw the line?
I usually draw the line after at least, if I've not found anything in terms of, footholds or things I could look into more, I tend to just stop after a certain point where it's just, not coming, it's becoming very evident that the, target is very either doesn't have anything on it or doesn't seem to have anything that I could work with. So it really depends on just how I perceive the target, if it's something I could work with or not, and just kind of depends on the situation.
Okay. And let's talk about routines and motivation. Let's completely just walk away from the hacking stuff. I want to get to know what motivates you to hack. Why are you hacking? How do you? Is it that you just do it for when you need money, or do it when you want to do? You do it for fun, like it's a hobby? What's the motivation behind it? And how often do you do it?
Motivation for hacking has always just been to, I guess, learn as well as, I guess, help secure stuff and help, as a sort of greater good type deal of protecting websites from malicious hackers and all that. And as well as the learning aspect, the money and all that is not really a super big motivator.
Okay.
How often I hack kind of really depends. Currently, it's not as often as I want to because, um, currently I have a job and all that as well, so that sort of takes precedent over, well, hacking. Um, so that's just sort of what's going on with me.
Okay. And do you have a routine? Like just daily routine? Do you wake up, do something like meditate, stretch, whatever, go to work? Do you have any routines like that you follow every day?
Not really, it's just kind of what I feel like, honestly. It's just
No.
sort of do as I want to and all that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a route. I don't want to call it a routine, but it's like every day I try to wake up at 7:30, try to like take an hour before I go into work, do some stuff, go to work, check on some stuff, try to hack some of this data that I have came up from the last previous scan, go back to work, try to focus, and then that's what I think. It's. I'm just curious to hear how others go through, especially if you have a job and you're also doing bug bounties at a large scale. There's got to be something that keeps you sane, right? You're not using your insanity. You're not using your sanity.
Well, yeah, I guess in a certain way, like hacking is a bit more, is very meditative for me because it's just a very, you kind of know the process, how things go. You know what to do and sure comes soothing in a way because it's just like you just know what to expect and you kind of with the experience you have before you know what to expect and it's very calm process at least for me.
Okay. What about burnouts? Do you deal with burnouts at all?
Yeah, like there's if anybody's like seen research I've done, it's always a lot of periods of time where I just don't do anything at all on Twitter and then suddenly I just drop something big and then just disappear for a while again because you know burnout is something that is that's something I do experience and something that people need to understand that to understand when they have reached their limit for a certain period of time, they need to just disconnect from everything and just take time off completely. And
Yeah.
that's something I've been trying to as moderate basically. So I've been taking periods of time off from hacking and coming back and doing some work and then taking time off again and all that and just kind of balancing things out.
What about imposter syndrome?
Oh yeah, that's a big one. Like
Yeah.
seeing how people do all these big hacks and or seeing them hack certain targets that you've hacked on before and them finding something very big when you just not seen before. That does affect you. Imposter syndrome is a big thing, but at the same time, it is something you can manage if you're able to understand that. At the same time, if you're looking at the lens of somebody else who has seen your work and has never done like hacking before, you are on a certain level to them what you see somebody else as. And it's something that you can work on and something that I believe you can get over as well.
But how do you deal with it though? Do you just tell yourself not to compare yourself to others?
I tend to just try not to focus on in a certain way. I try to not focus on, I guess, what other people are doing, but like what they did, and that I could use it as a personal challenge to try to push myself to get better, I guess you could say.
Oh,
So rather see it as a fault of my own, I see it as a challenge that I need to take on if I want to push myself to be better, I guess.
okay. That's a good way to deal with it. To challenge yourself to try to accomplish that thing versus comparing yourself instead.
Oh yeah. And there's a lot more for Christianity because it's like instead of seeing it as a fault that you are inherently not able to do this, it's more
It's okay. We'll take a break here. We'll be right back. Don't worry about it at all. Don't worry about it. You're good. You're good.
oh, the timing.
No, you're good. You're good. All right, go for it. You were saying?
Like when you don't see when you start stop take when you start like stop seeing it as a fault of your own inherently and you see it as a challenge, you are able to work on it and it's something that is manageable and that you can overcome in a way. It's something that you can take steps towards working towards. Like, okay, I wasn't able to find this thing on this target. but they were able to. So I need to work on these specific things that led them to be able to find this. So if they mention like like for the biggest example, easiest one is basically if you see something like you'll find a big this like big vulnerability on this web subdomain that you were poking at before, and you read through their write-up and you notice that they were mostly focused on recon, or that's how they found it, or certain vulnerability aspects that you don't know, then you know to take those aspects that they know a lot better than you do as a challenge to improve those areas that you need to work on, for example.
That's really good advice. That's really, really good advice. I think that's probably one of the better answers I've gotten for this question, at least in the past interviews I can think of. It's really cool. It's a good way. It's a good mature way to get out of the mentality of I'm not good enough to I'm gonna be good. I'm gonna be better now because I know I didn't know about this stuff.
Oh yeah.
Very cool. What about collaboration? You said you collaborate with a few hackers. Do you think collaboration plays a big role in learning and doing good in bug bounties?
Honestly, yeah. Like when I first started off, I didn't think I'd be collaborating with my people and sort of that I'd be mostly doing things solo. But after collaborating with a few hackers and seeing how they hack stuff and how much different their process is of hacking and compared to my own, it's something that I want to do more of because it's you'll learn a lot more through collaboration and you find a lot more vulnerabilities because you're able to combine what you know with what they know, and you're able to find a lot. You're able to accomplish a lot more. So you know, working with different people leads to a lot more progress, I guess you could say, because you're able to share information, understand how share different styles of hacking, for example, as well. If they do a lot more automated than like recon, but you are more focused on just sort of getting into things and breaking them apart, for example, you're able to cover a lot more ground because while they're looking for more targets for you to play on and hack on, they might be able to find things that you might not notice as well. That's something else as well. You have different experiences, and you're able to combine those experiences in a way that allow you to find things that the other might have never noticed before. If you notice that the specific website they were looking at has something that you've seen before in another program that you hacked before, you could show them how you did it and why it's a vulnerability or what sort of software it's using or things like that.
Okay. I think yeah, I think with the collaboration thing, the biggest thing for me is to see how others do things, the same things as I do. Because I miss stuff and they don't, obviously. And vice versa. They miss stuff that I don't.
Yeah, it's something very, it's something that you honestly need to like. A lot of people need to realize that just because you missed something, but somebody else found it, doesn't mean that you're inherently bad. It's
Mm.
just, you're able to learn from that because you have it's it's being mentored while you're hacking away, and it's vice and it goes vice versa as well. So you're learning from them as they're hacking, you're learning, and they're learning from you as you're hacking, and you're able to have a back and forth in a way to see how each other works.
Yeah, I want to, like, it's hard to find someone to collaborate with because, like, there's a trust thing. But I think once you build a relationship with someone where you can trust them and do stuff together, it's a huge difference. It
Oh yeah.
becomes huge.
Oh, definitely.
Do you follow a checklist or anything like that when you're hacking, or is it just a mental thing that you look for specific things? Like, do you when you get a target, do you in the mentally you have a checklist of things that you look for?
In a short way, I guess, and it depends on what I want to look for on that specific day, because usually I vary on what sort of vulnerabilities I want to focus on or find. So in a way, the checklist will vary. So if I want to start looking for more information leakages and things like that, I would start going through a checklist of checking Google Docs, checking for any sort of documents they have or looking for ways that they could be leaked out through their websites, for example, an API that might be overly permissive and allow unauthenticated people accessing it. And so it's just, going through a specific checklist of how I want to approach that vulnerability for a specific website, for example. If I want to start looking for other stuff, then I'll go through a checklist for that. So kind of, I guess, varies, really.
Okay. Um, somebody asked. That was a part of the question someone asked. It said, "What types of vulnerabilities do you look for usually?"
So I typically focus on SSRF vulnerabilities, PII leakages, as well as for any sort of API vulnerabilities as well. I've
Mhm.
been starting to look for more, I guess, what is it called? Like template injections and that type of sort of stuff
Okay.
as well. And I tend to focus on those types of vulnerabilities, but I tend to focus on other vulnerabilities as I learn about them or want to try to find them. So if I wanted to start, if I say like, oh, I've never found any of these types of vulnerabilities, so I guess I should start looking for these types of vulnerabilities and see how to create a process to find those vulnerabilities and see if I'm able to find them.
Cool. What's your advice for new bug hunters? Do you have anything that you wish you knew in the beginning when you first got started in bug bounties that you can share?
Honestly, the biggest thing that I need to know when I first started like learning bug bounties and hacking in general was just be able to ask questions and ask good questions, and being able to ask for help when I need it. You know, understanding that asking inherently for help isn't a bad thing either,
Okay.
and basically how to word questions properly, how to ask questions that are good and ask for information that you need instead of like it's very basic how do you do this thing instead of like how to hack this type of instance when you're dealing with this sort of stuff or whatever.
Be detailed. Yeah. Ask the questions
Yeah,
that I'm not gonna Google for you and tell you here's a link. You could have found it
yeah,
yourself. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, that sort of stuff.
Fair enough. Okay. Um, before I jump into the fun part of the interview, you did a talk at Hack Luxembourg.
Yeah, hack Luxembourg.
How'd you like it?
It was interesting, although not as prepared as I wanted to be because it was kind of rushed,
Okay.
honestly.
So Ash is, I think, from the area, and he's the one asking. Says, how did she like it when she spoke at the conference, and how does she feel to present her research on a stage?
Like when you're first like presenting your research, it's always, I guess, very nerve-wracking because you want to present information that is interesting. You want to hope that your information is relevant enough for people to learn and gather something from it. And the conference itself was actually it was a very good conference as well. One that I was surprised I didn't hear about before as well. Uh, I mean, you first and with presenting your research for the first time, like you want to realize that your talk was also recognized and accepted for such things. So you also need to realize information what you're presenting is good enough for people, and not to scare yourself out of thinking that what you're presenting is bad or wrong or trash or whatever.
I definitely relate. I know exactly what you're talking about. You did also some research on the VPN stuff that went down like last year.
Yeah, Pulse Secure.
Yeah, tell me why. What got you hooked on Pulse Secure stuff? How did it work? What did you find? Tell me more.
Ah, so Pulse Secure was something I kept noticing popping up in a lot of websites at the time. So the military used a lot of Pulse Secure, a
Hmm.
lot of bug bounty programs used Pulse Secure, and it was something that kept popping up and noticing a lot. And when Orange Side basically came out with their research and talk at DEF CON, or I think it was Black Hat, one of those two, um, but didn't like mention that there was an RCE and Pulse Secure and all that or something like that.
Yeah.
It caught my interest because there's a lot of bug bounty websites I know of that I can pop if I have the exploit. But when he gave his Black Hat talk, he didn't give any exploit details. He only talked about how you could check for the vulnerability and not actually exploit properly. So this led to me and another researcher basically deciding we're gonna figure out how this exploit actually works and how to properly exploit it without having the exploit detail beyond like a little hint that Orange Sai gave during his talk. That led like within like a day or two we figured out how to exploit it, and then we brought on another friend to help us automate the exploit process, and then from there we kind of just started researching into how we could escalate it and things like that. So with Orange Size talk, he mentioned that you could possibly basically arbitrarily run a program on a computer that has the post-secure
Mm-hmm.
client, for example, because it was an administrative feature that lets you start up a program as soon as you launch the VPN. Uh, but we ended up finding that you could just arbitrarily drop a file onto the computer through an SMB share easily.
Wow.
So that was one of the things that we found and noticed that was pretty interesting, that we could take the exploit a lot further than Ordin Size initially research published showed. Um, so yeah, that was very interesting exploit because with we were able to find a lot of websites that were vulnerable to, and we were able to properly show research properly show how to exploit it to companies and all that, because a lot of websites were initially thinking that we didn't actually have the exploit for it, but we showed them how we were able to exploit, and they're rather intrigued by it. So I guess the process of it was mostly because we we were antsy for the expo, and we didn't want to wait, for Orange Side to drop his research. We kind of wanted to get that out now, which was a good and bad thing because of our research. The research basically, the two research papers I published basically showed how a malicious hacker could basically tech the exploit all the way through, through arbitrarily, dropping their own, ransomware or whatever on a bunch of computers. And yeah, it was a good and bad thing at the same time because, well, now people know what to look for in terms of, logs and things like that when they're getting hit by these exploits and all that. So yeah.
I'm curious to know how you guys reversed it. I'm really curious to understand. We don't have to talk about it, but I'm curious to understand how you went from Orange's talk to reversing it, and then going after bug bounty programs. Did you do a write up on any of this? Do you plan on doing a presentation or write up on it?
I did. I actually did publish two articles on it.
Did you?
Yeah, detective. Let me find it. Let's see.
Wow, how did I miss this? Because I was really, I saw a bunch of tweets from you when you were doing all of this, but I don't remember reading anything. Maybe I read it and I can't remember. But if you have something, I would love to read it and understand what
I
you guys said.
DM'd you on Twitter with it.
Thank you, I appreciate it. That's cool. That's really awesome.
I was actually supposed to do a talk on this in a and I think it was Born Hack. It was a conference in Denmark, but I wasn't able to do it because, well, timing was bad and COVID-19 happened, so there was
Yeah.
really no way I could go to Denmark and do a live talk. Um, but I might do it next year if COVID has died down. So what our process basically happened was that my friend discovered that you could get that onto an Azure, cloud server,
Mm-hmm.
and then he basically just tried to reverse engineer from there. And the
So you guys had
process
your
how
own instance, you mean? Like you had your own instance up, and then you guys were going after it.
oh yeah, that's how we
That's
did it.
cool. Okay.
So we did both through I
It's a
guess
black
blind
box.
attacking.
Yeah.
Yeah, like black. We both tried to black box it, but we also figured out how to get the actual access to the actual box itself, because it was an outdated instance, of course, and we had to do a weird bunch of fushing with it to actually get like an actual cell on the server without needing to you know, actually hack into it, because, well, it's a server that we own, so we should be able to access it.
Mm-hmm.
And when we did get access to it, we were able to start looking for files and, try to dig through everything to see what sort of, relevant points that we need to look at, and look at through the source code for itself. And in the Detective article, we have, screenshots of all the code trees and all that of what sort of stuff you're looking at and what sort of was happening as it was happening.
Oh.
It was very fun because it was just sort of, the process of, we're gonna take a dev contact and then we're just gonna one day it.
You guys champed it though. That's really cool. You did it.
Oh yeah, it was really fun too. It was just like, now we can just hit a bunch of bug bounty websites with that, and it's just, yeah.
Yeah. Have you done this with other research, other CVEs or talks you have seen, or was this like one of your first instances of like doing this and having fun with it?
It was like the first time I ever did this, and it was actually really fun. It was this process of just like, let's get a team together and let's figure this out.
It's
And it was
really
actually
cool.
And then we automated it with this nice little exploit that basically automated throughout the entire exploit how to go from, the credentials all the way to just pulling it down and dropping a cell on it, basically.
That's
So some
awesome.
really neat, it was really fun.
That's
It
yeah.
was
I mean, I can imagine how many companies use Pulse.
oh god, there are so many.
They're easy to fingerprint for too.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because how we fingerprinted was through I think a specific HTML or JS file that like showed
Right.
out the version of it or something like that.
Yeah,
So we
yeah.
always just kept like we just kept looking for that specific file and we were just finding everything.
Very cool. Somebody's asking, is there anybody you look up to in the community, in the InfoSec or bug bounty community?
There's way too many to count.
Yeah.
There's just way too many, including you.
I don't know why I would be included on that list, but I appreciate it.
Hey, you do some fun stuff too. The PDF SSRF stuff was really cool.
Those were like just years of me going after PDF stuff because people weren't recognizing it. I don't think people thought about like, oh shit, XSS in the PDF. I wonder what could go wrong.
It's still valid research. It's still
Hmm.
very valid research. Like noticing how it's just like noticing the weird nuanced behavior in this popular software and noticing that you could just pull out some data that it shouldn't be out there or whatever, you know?
Yeah, it's fun doing research like that. I don't do it often, but it's fun when you get to do it. That's why I was curious if you did other stuff with the VPN because it's fun. It's really fun to get into that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, when you start doing like exploit development and all that, it gets really interesting because you could do all sorts of weird things and find all sorts of fun nuances.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap this up. I don't know if you've seen the interviews before, but I usually end them with a quick game. Not even a game. It's just a fun question game. I give you a series of questions. It's about your bug bounty experience, and then at the end we play a word game. I'll tell you when it starts. I give you a word, and then the first thing that comes into your head, you just tell me what you think about it. Okay.
Hmm.
Let me take. I'm taking notes of stuff you say that I want to ask you during this. Okay. So, do you remember the first bug bounty program you ever hacked on?
That was ubiquity.
Okay.
I think that was yeah,
If you had to hack on one bug bounty program for the rest of your life, what would it be?
probably the Department of Defense programs.
Wow. Okay. That's a first for us. Okay. Cool. Do you remember your first bounty?
That was ubiquity. That was a stored XSS and that was a self XSS as well. For some reason, they paid me
Do you remember what you got for it?
$500.
Do you remember what you did with your first bounty?
I don't remember honestly. I think I spent it on something stupid.
All right. What's your favorite bug type?
Ah, that's just rough as always.
Um, have you purchased anything memorable with your bug bounty money that you're proud of? Like you done it with through bug bounties and hacking that you always wanted. Either it's travel, a house, a car, anything like that.
That was just a laptop that I actually like.
Oh yeah, okay, that's fair. Okay, that counts. Any hackers you collaborate with, you want to give a shout out to?
That would be CDL mainly. I've done a lot of stuff with him.
Corbin's awesome. He's a
Oh
very
yeah.
good dude. I love that guy. He's really cool. Any hackers you want to collaborate with that you want to call out on this stream?
Oh god, I'd be here for too long.
Give me three.
Uh, Ryanator would be one.
Justin Gardner, okay.
Oh god. Now I'm just blanking on all their names. Well, this sucks.
Well, you got me one at least. Justin is a very good person to collaborate with. I highly recommend. He's
Oh yeah,
very.
I've seen his work too. It's very lovely.
He's he's very easy to approach. So I definitely recommend. What do you do for fun outside of hacking? What's your hobbies like?
That would be drawing. That'd be drawing. Nature stuff as well, hiking, all that as well, which is
Very cool.
very nice to disconnect from everything.
Okay. Um, what's your favorite tool? Can't say burp.
Ah,
I knew you were gonna say it.
everybody says burp. It's like the most best like bench suite there is. I guess that'd be like Aquatone. I guess that's like this thing I've been using so much, even when it stopped being like a subdomain scanner.
Oh my god! The fact that you still use it is great. All right, let's jump into our question game. It's pretty short, but I think we can have some fun with it. So I give you a thing, and you tell me the first one that pops into your head. Okay. DoD.
Easy to hack.
HackerOne.
The best platform I've ever used.
All right, happy to hear that. Life hacking events.
Amazing experience.
PHP.
It should not exist.
Burp Suite.
The best tool ever.
Aquatone.
Recon for days.
Recon.
I'm blanking out. Oh god. Uh, necessary.
Fuff.
By far best like directory search or brute forcing tool there is.
Okay, fair enough. Pulse Secure.
Insecure.
Atlassian products. Mostly Jira.
Oh god. Leaky as fuck.
XSS.
Everybody's first vulnerability.
SSRF.
A window into the corporate network.
Fuck yeah. And last but not least, because you mentioned him, CDL.
By far one of the best hackers I've ever worked with.
Very cool. Well, hey, I wanted to say thank you so much for joining me again. For people watching this is Alyssa Herrera. Make sure you follow her on Twitter. I'm a big fan of you, Alyssa. I'm really proud to have you on this show. I appreciate you so much for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you too for having me.
Anything you want to say before I let you go? Any last comments, jokes, puns, anything?
No, just thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing your work in the future, and hopefully,
Oh yeah.
post-COVID, we can hang out and do some hacking together.
Oh yeah, definitely. That'd be great.
Cool. Well, I'll talk soon. See ya.
Yeah.
Bye.
See ya.